guys, guess what time it is? It's fixed Gambit Prime time. Let's discuss a version of Gambit that doesn't seem too optimistic to hope for, something of a rough estimate of what Gambit Prime might look like as it closes in on its final version. As much as I wanted to tell you about my own personal vision for Gambit, this got longer than I expected, so if you want to hear about Gambit off the rails, Gambit Perfected as I've been calling it, that'll be in an upcoming video. One other thing before we start, if you haven't watched my other Gambit Prime video, you should go watch that first for some context on what problems in Gambit I'm trying to solve. Now that we've had the perfect amount of ado, I'm going to kick this off with role changes. I'd say siphoning is the biggest contributing factor to the snowballing problem we have in Gambit, so let's fix it first. Siphoning is no longer possible, period, and draining is only possible with giant blockers, which get a huge buff to their health pool. This makes giant blockers worth sending, and this way collectors have a specific role-based interaction with the enemy team. If a team wants to drain the enemy bank, they will have to deliberately bank 20 motes at once, and it will be up to their collector to do that. As a positive side effect, this could save lives of innocent controllers and monitors. But while this does make the collector a little more valuable, it's obviously just a nerf to everyone else, which doesn't make collectors feel more important. Have you ever saw a collector on your team and found yourself thinking, oh god, this wastebag having, white aura glowing, 20 mode hoarding numpty is about to throw the game for his triumphs. Lord, why have you forsaken me? Well, that's a little extreme, chill. But obviously collector needs more than a giant blocker. So to that end, let's give some significant, unambiguous buffs. The collector now radiates an aura called Helping Hand that gives teammates increased supercharge speed. Every time a collector picks up a mote, players within a 40-meter radius get their supers back at a 30% increased rate for 3 seconds. A single mote is a trivial bonus, but if there are players actively creating motes for the collector to pick up, the collector returns the favor by giving them their super much faster. This will help the team charge supers at a rate that will give them more counterplay against invasions, but it will be a much less effective perk if other players try to grab motes before the collector can. Importantly, Helping Hand cannot be stacked with multiple collectors. Finally, when a collector earns a half-banked medal, their Helping Hand buff graduates to a well-oiled machine buff that persists for the remainder of the game. This perk grants an additional 40% damage buff against boss combatants, including the Primeval, to allies within a 40-meter radius without losing the benefits of Helping Hand. I understand that 40% is going to sound like a lot, but let's bear in mind that you can get a 25% buff with virtually unlimited health from a Well of Radiance even in Shadowkeep. And a well-oiled machine only activates when teams try to work as a unit. If the Collector or Reaper do each other's jobs too much, the chance that the best available buff is forfeit, and they'll have to rely on alternatives like Weapons of Light instead. These buffs to Collector ensure that picking up motes has a purpose beyond the mere necessity of banking motes, and the Collector has value that is preferable to just filling the bank as fast as possible as a team. Next up we have the Sentry. Sentries can now get motes by killing blockers quickly. If a blocker is killed within 10 seconds of spawning, the Sentry gets half of the blocker's mote value except when killing giant blockers, which will never drop motes. Sentries also get an overshield whenever they're invaded, so they're a bit more resilient, and to reinforce the Sentry's reason to actively counter the Invader, the Sentry's mark on an Invader is persistent until the Invader leaves. Once the Invader is marked, they stay marked until they die or return to their side. To keep the Sentry role more engaging, since they probably want to stay near the bank at this point, I would also suggest that a Taken Scion or Thrall spawns in every time their team picks up 2 motes. Though these enemies won't block the bank, they will keep it dangerous and they'll keep the Sentry busier. I don't think we should rely entirely on the enemy team to do that. Much like a collector doing their job well, if the Sentry has gotten at least 40 kills on these fodder enemies and blockers combined, their entire team receives a Vigilance perk that grants short pulsing wall hacks against invaders. Vigilance will show the invader's location every 5 seconds to create better counterplay leading into and during the boss fight. These changes help to ensure the Sentry has a specific, appropriate positioning and role without making the role feel purely reactive, since they'll consistently be clearing the bank and banking motes themselves. Third on our list is the Reaper, who now absolutely crushes enemies at close quarters. Reaper gets dual-wielded shotguns and a Wraith ability that makes him immune. Wait. Reaper gets a combination of Threat Detector and Surrounded perks, and begins health recovery on rapid kills. Now, whenever Reapers are close to enemies, they get ridiculous handling speed, reload speed, and a huge damage buff, and they recover health as long as they leverage those abilities effectively. They're also the only role that can get the full mote value for enemies out of killing them. While a knight drops 3 motes currently in Gambit, it will only drop 2 for non-Reapers, and all other enemies will be tuned down slightly in their non-Reaper mote drops as well. This gives Reaper the potential to be a very impactful player if they're an absolute killing machine. For the Reaper's investment perk, once the Reaper kills 50 enemies, they get double damage against all non-Primeval Taken enemies. Since I'm working with a hypothetical model in which Taken enemies continue to spawn during the boss fight like in normal Gambit, which I will briefly discuss later, having a Reaper to easily pick them apart will be a valuable time saver. Finally, we have Invaders. Invaders can no longer lock the enemy team's bank, although they can still drain it if they stand nearby. More importantly, if an Invader equips a power weapon at any point while invading, they're kicked to orbit and receive a penalty for leaving the match early. Just kidding. But I think we can all agree that power weapon invasions are super not cool. So, if an invader scores a kill with a power weapon, their victim doesn't lose any motes on death. If you want to be more of a hindrance than a time waster, you'll have to use other options. To make this intuitive in gameplay, I suggest adding the sonic ring drop noise to non-power weapon kills. I should note that thanks to the rising levels of power ammo throughout the game, power weapon kills from an invader should still heal the Primeval during the boss phase. This change will no doubt usher in an age of Izanagi's burden, so invaders also don't get their infinite special ammo regeneration anymore either. So why would you wear the invader set at this point? Well, because your invasion schedule is going to stay borked if you don't. 40-second invasion schedule during the Primeval phase stays, but if the portal is activated by a player in the invader role, it resets at the 30-second interval instead. Also, your wall hacks are pulsing rather than full uptime if you invade as a non-invader. Basically, the current iteration of invaders is ridiculously strong, and while a lot of it should stay that way, the things that make it strong should be the role perks, not just part of doing an invasion. These changes to the invader role are designed to make it more strategic and skillful. Invasions will be based more heavily on tactically engaging enemies with special or primary weapons, and supers will be the dominant way to score multiple kills, which, thanks to the upcoming changes in Shadowkeep, should be a bit more reasonable to shut down through good teamwork. I had 3 design goals in mind with these imaginations. Firstly, each role needs to be indispensable. Gambit does not have the mechanical depth for each of the roles to be truly unique, so the value provided by their perks needs to make up for that deficit. Considering only the dominant perks within each set I've described, you cannot hope to keep up with the boss TPS of a team if they have a collector and you don't. You can't get the mote value out of blockers without a sentry. You give up motes and spread your team thin without a reaper. You will have slower, weaker invasions without an invader. This is intended to make players look at their role bonus perks and say, okay, I'll be the collector when they see they don't have one. You should look forward to having one of each role on your team. Secondly, each role needed to not be worth doubling down on. If you had 2 collectors, they would fight for motes and hurt each other's chances at getting a half banked medal. If you had 2 sentries, one would not be getting any motes from blockers, and you'd be hurting your chances at getting vigilance. If you had 2 invaders, one would offer no perk value to the team most of the time, and finally, if you had 2 reapers, you would lose boss DPS, strong invasions, or blocker motes for a much smaller benefit. Unless I'm missing something staring me right in the face, these 2 factors should combine to make the best possible team composition one player of each role. Minimal stepping on toes, maximal benefit in the final fight. With balancing addressed, hopefully, the third guiding principle of this attempt at improving the roles is to ensure far higher counterplay to invaders, so that invasions can remain frequent and impactful, without being outright oppressive. To this end, collectors now have a way to generate supers for their teammates more quickly, which will encourage the use of supers to shut down invasions. Sentries now provide slow pulsing wall hacks to ensure that a team can't get totally blindsided. Sentries can also semi-permanently mark invaders, and they have a more similar level of health for a fairer fight. And finally, between these factors and the disadvantage of using power weapons as an invader not taking motes, invasions are less likely to overwhelm the benefits of basic teamwork in determining a victor. Does that all sound good? I hope so, because we're almost done. By addressing the way roles interact with the mechanics, we've hopefully addressed siphoning and the invasion schedule sufficiently, but we have a few more mechanics to address, and then we'll move on our merry way. The last of the current Gambit Prime problems that I haven't addressed is the Primeval envoys. No more immunity phases. This works similarly to normal Gambit now. If you kill a wave of envoys, you get a stack of the Primeval Slayer buff in the Well of Light drops, which now heals at a similar rate to a Healing Rift. After a while has passed, another wave spawns, and you can get another stack of Primeval Slayer. Also, similarly to normal Gambit, enemies actually spawn during the boss fight. Really not sure why that got thrown out for Gambit Prime. Isn't Prime supposed to be the, harder mode? This change was just weird to me. Anyway, similar to how Gambit Prime has more orange bar enemies and some yellow bars during the mote collection phase, orange bar and yellow bar taken enemies need to spawn during the boss phase to spread out the focus and make the Reaper's role more important. At this point, we're at the miscellaneous changes that would need to be made to compensate for the change's impact. With a 40% damage buff from collectors and a persistently vulnerable boss, the boss health pool will need to increase significantly. Considering the buff stacking changes coming in Shadowkeep, this doesn't need to be entirely too steep, but bringing the boss health to 140% of what it currently is would be my best guess at appropriate, without having any testing. Additionally, as stated before, enemies drop fewer motes for non-reapers. The current pace of the game in terms of length is good in Prime, but with sentries picking up a new mote source, that would get sped up, so to maintain the current pacing, other enemies will have to drop fewer motes. Single mote droppers still drop 1, triple mote droppers now only drop 2, and quintuple mote droppers now only drop 3. Sparklies and gigantic yellow bar enemies still drop their high quantities of motes just to ensure that a misplaced final blow isn't too detrimental to the team. Overall, I think these changes would make the mote collection phase similar length to what it is now. One last major change, and as a separate matter entirely, The invasion portal is getting flip-flopped. Rather than opening when your team gets 25 motes to reward you for being in the lead, the invasion portal opens up whenever your enemies get 25, 50, or 75 motes. Frankly, it just makes no sense that the team that is losing is the one without invasions to slow down the team that's winning. This change alone would make a night and day difference in the current iteration of Gambit Prime to prevent the ridiculous snowballing that exists, and it would help players to synchronize their blockers if they wanted to discourage instantaneous reactionary invasions after the portal opened up. Yeah, this is just... It would be a major improvement if they made this change and no other change at all. This on its own would massively improve Gambit. Which is actually why I tricked you all and brought it up at the very end. Now you've already listened to my suggestions for welding and painting and polishing Gambit before we got the mental duct tape out. There's one final, hugely consequential impact of Gambit that I haven't discussed at all, which is how players opt into roles. The current upgrade path for role perks is far from the best because it isn't easily accessible, which means players aren't going to bother in practice. I've considered the possibility that players opt into roles through gameplay. For example, first player to 15 motes as a collector, first player to 20 kills as a reaper, first player to kill 10 bank scions as a sentry, and first player to invade as an invader. I've also considered opt-in during the pregame before transmat by standing on the 4 plates, but with color coding for the roles. I've also considered the idea that Drifter sells a class item for each role that opts you into it. Just to be clear, I don't think that having levels like Illicit, Outlawed, and Notorious can work without a very compelling reason to play through the mode long term. And that, a compelling reason to play long term, is hard for me to put together when I still don't entirely understand what the intended audience of Gambit is. I do think one thought worth considering is unique cosmetics unlocked by playing the roles in whatever iteration of Gambit comes next. Some way to show off you're a master of the role that you chose to play in Gambit, something that you can wear on any armor set. Anyway, I think there needs to be some far-out goalposts for the rewards based on roles rather than just for infamy ranking. Time for a recap of the major points. Invasion schedule is reversed for the banking phase. Your portal now opens up based on your opponent's banked motes rather than your own. Also, the 30-second interval for the portal during the boss phase is back if an Invader role player activates the portal. Invaders can no longer deny motes using heavy weapons. They can still use their full arsenal, but heavy weapon kills do not deny motes. They also lose regenerating special ammo and can no longer lock the bank. Invaders are now the only role with full uptime wall hacks on invasions. Sentries now get an overshield when invaded. They can put a mark on that lasts the duration of the invasion on invaders, and they are the only players who can earn motes from blockers. A sentry who successfully defends the bank all game activates pulsing wall hacks for their team against invaders. Collectors give the super regenerating helping hand aura while collecting motes, giant blockers are the only blockers that cause draining, and a half-banked medal activates the well-oiled machine buff that increases damage against boss combatants by 40% for nearby allies. Reapers now have strong benefits for close quarters combat against AI combatants. They're able to deal more damage and recover health mid-combat while fighting hordes of enemies, and they get more motes from enemy kills relative to the others who, as stated, now receive less. In the boss phase, many more taken enemies, including sub-bosses spawn, which a successful Reaper will deal greatly increased damage to. The Primeval Envoys no longer give boss immunity, but instead grant increasing stacks of Primeval Slayer buff like in normal Gambit. This is a global buff which does not require players to stand in a Well of Light, although the Well of Light now heals at a moderate speed. The boss health pool is substantially larger. With the upcoming changes in Shadowkeep, it will be somewhat harder to smash bosses, so while the boss needs a health buff, it doesn't need to be extreme. Hopefully all of these changes in combination would make Gambit a really great mode, but it's hard to be sure exactly what it would look like because we'll probably never play this exact mode. That all said, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you like my videos and want to see more, feel free to subscribe to this channel, and also follow me on Twitter and Twitch if you would like to see more content. Have a great day, everyone.